Hi, and welcome to the Cosmic Circle, the friendly neighborhood companion podcast to thecosmiccircus.com, your source for news and reviews about everything science fiction, fantasy, and comic book. I'm Isla Ruby, and today we have an awesome episode. I'm joined by my two friends, Anthony Flagg and Drew. How are you guys doing?
I'm pretty good. Ready to talk about some Mandalorian.
Yeah, this is Anthony. It's Friday, so it's always a good start, and I'm always ready
Yeah.
to chat with my friends. And I'm glad Drew's here tonight.
Yeah, I forgot to mention this is Drew.
Our very special guest, because we don't normally get to talk to you on the podcast. I know we talk on Discord and on Twitter, but it's different live and in person.
Yeah, I'm definitely glad to be here tonight.
So tonight we have a super special episode. We're going to talk about the finale of the Book of Bo Katan, otherwise known as The Mandalorian. The last episode, The Return. It just aired this week, and I'm curious, what are your general thoughts? Was it like a satisfying conclusion to the season?
So yeah, like I made a tweet where I said the season finale is actually really enjoyable. It's a lot of fun if you can accept what happens and if you can accept what doesn't happen. I think a lot of people were kind of hoping for more. What more they were asking for, to be honest, I'm really not sure. I think that they just wanted a better written plot, I guess. But it was a great action episode. I mean, it was well directed too. I mean, I think it was one of the finest Mandalorian episodes, like in terms of cinematography and just how much action was in there. I thought the stuff with Grogu and Din was really heartwarming. I think I'm kind of happy. I don't know. I know that they kind of they undid every plot line from season 2 essentially this season, but it's just like you can't help but like not love the fact that they're like in a little house like in the middle of nowhere. It's just like you just can't help but love that.
And before I let you go on real quick, if you're listening to this, there are spoilers. I probably should have mentioned that, but if you're listening to a finale recap, you kind of have to expect that.
Yeah, I hope so.
The finale for me was great because it had a lot of things that classic Star Wars has. It has a nice, mostly satisfying conclusion. We had droids, which we don't get a whole lot of in Mandalorian. Like he had the assistance of R5 helping him get through those gates. I love that part with the mouse droids and everything. And then you had a nice action scene with the Praetorian Guards and with the dark saber. Rest in peace, dark saber. And you had just a whole army approaching. Like, it was awesome seeing dozens of Mandalorians flying in air at each other and just doing some cool moves. So I enjoyed it. For the finale itself was a great episode, short and sweet, didn't have to drag it out too long. As far for this season, I understand where some people might see some frustrations, but overall, if this would have been the series finale for Mandalorian, I would have been very happy, especially with that closing shot.
And we're going to talk about that later.
Yeah, it does end kind of on like I saw like a lot of like probably like 50% of people saying like if this was the end it would work really well, and I think to some degree I agree with that, and I think to some degree it probably is a little bit of the end. I mean, they kind of talked about how everything like Filoni and Favreau, I believe, I don't remember what press event it was at, but they kind of mentioned that everything has an end, and they're kind of getting to that kind of culmination. And with the announcement and celebration of the movie, you'd have to kind of assume that's probably it for the Mando and Grogu. I'm sure Grogu will continue on because there's just no way you can't keep using Grogu, but I'm assuming there'll be some sort of resolution to everything. I think that'll kind of lead into the sequel trilogy.
Now, you mentioned celebration. Were you surprised then, or it doesn't sound like you were surprised that there was a lot of mention of Ahsoka. There was obviously a lot of mention of the 3 movies and Filoni's movie that kind of ties in all the TV shows. Were you surprised we didn't hear anything about a season 4 or anything moving forward about?
I mean, The Mandalorian takes its time with production. If you have, like the last season that came out was at the end of 2020. It was a good time, good long while ago. I kind of felt weird having new Mandalorian episodes just based off how much of how much has gone on in the world since then. So it's been a bit weird to like see new Mandalorian episodes. So no, I think I think it'll come out in probably season 4. I definitely think season 4 will get made based off the fact that Favreau said that it's already written. It's just about going into production, and it'll probably do so probably by the end of the year. I know we have, the strike coming up that we'll probably talk about, but I think that'll probably affect, multiple Star Wars projects. But yeah, I think I would say, season 4 probably coming probably like 2 years or so.
It's funny you mentioned the long gap, because you know what I realized? That season 2 of Mandalorian, I didn't even know y'all. We weren't even
Oh,
acquainted. We weren't friends. We didn't
Yeah.
know each other. That's
dude,
how
is that
long it was
true?
between. Yes,
It's
it is.
it's
I
been that
promise you.
long.
So
Yeah,
when did
no,
season
seriously.
1 air then? What, because
2019.
2019,
oh
because it
my
came out.
goodness.
They tied up one of the episodes where Grogu used the Force healing with the Rise of Skywalker, where Rey did it herself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember, it was that
Yep.
same
Yep.
week. I'll never
Wow.
forget that.
Gosh, I do remember that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was
So
a
That's so
long
long
time.
ago.
That was like a
yeah,
lifetime ago. Holy
yeah.
moly.
So that was the first thing I was like, well, first off, it's been a while, but I'm so glad that we're here and talking about season 3, because they're in 2020. I'm like, all right, damn, they left us on a big cliffhanger. And then we got Book of Boba Fett a year ago. So even then, there was still a couple years in between we even saw what happened with them.
Yeah, I think that
So
kind of bridged the gap a little bit. That's why
it helped.
it did. It really Book of Boba Fett really did feel like Mandalorian season 3. I mean,
Well,
for the most part.
there's a lot of Mando in the Book of Boba Fett.
Yep.
He like
Yeah, a
He
lot
gets
of
his own
Mando.
episode.
yeah.
There's a whole episode that
Well,
completely belongs to Mando,
I
and then
mean, pretty
half of
much 2
another one that
episodes.
went to Grogu. But yeah, you
Yeah,
could
pretty
say
much
Mando.
2.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just nuts. But yeah, I think that's just such a that I know it's like beating a dead horse, but the writing with Book of Boba Fett season 1, it's like I don't understand why they weren't able to just make that into Mandalorian season 3. Like
Mhm.
it really felt like there was so much in those 3 episodes that could have been used in season 3 to further the plot in such a meaningful way. And I think that's what people are really upset about with season 3 is the lack of kind of development in certain aspects. I think that you had such a clear development in you had Book of Boba Fett, you had those 3 episodes, you had the one episode where Mando is with the armorer and with Paz Vizsla, where you learn a lot more about Mandalorian culture and the dark saber. You even have a trial of the dark saber, which is just such a crazy thing to throw in like a random episode of the Book of Boba Fett.
Mhm.
And then you have episode 6 with Luke Skywalker and Ahsoka and Grogu and Jedi training, and then like
Don't forget my boy
there just
R2.
was just so much. Yeah, R2 too. There was just so much there that they totally could have used in season 3 of Mando. That I think they almost kind of they used up a lot of their story in those for like those 3 episodes that kind of left a hole in season 3 a little bit.
I'm
If you
glad.
listen to the one podcast that I did with Vic and Brian in the beginning of season of Mando, I made a mention how upset I was that they never put in any recap what happened in Book of Boba Fett.
Mhm.
And I still am upset that they never incorporated, not even in like the individual episodes, they left you completely hanging. If you didn't watch Book of Boba Fett, you walked into it saying, why is Grogu back?
Yeah.
What is happening? Like, did I miss something? You did. You absolutely did. Why is he on this big mission to go to Mandalore? Like, everything
Why
that
is
drove the
he?
season was driven by what happened in Book of Boba Fett, and yet we didn't explore that.
And that
Why
was
is he
me.
flying Anakin Skywalker's N1 starfighter?
And that was me too, because I didn't think that I needed the Book of Boba Fett to watch season 3 of The Mandalorian. So, when I watched that first episode, I was very confused because I had just, I was binging it, so I had just finished, the last episode of season 2, and he's back. And I was just so confused, and I had to go look it up. And I think that actually, goes to a larger point about the show too, because I think they kind of assume that you're all extremely online, and not everyone is online. Not everyone knows that you need to have that backstory to understand and enjoy the show.
Essentially, yeah.
And I think some of the extremely onlineness too may have also hurt the expectations for this final episode, because like if you were on Twitter, there's a lot of talk, like there were a lot of expectations, right? Like people were saying that someone was going to die, right? There was the expectation that either Bo Katan, Grogu, or Din were going to die. There's a lot of chatter over the spies, which kind of was led into from the last episode and kind of a little bit of a theme of the series. But, there's just like all this talk, and it was
And
so built
cameos.
up. Yeah, exactly.
People were expecting cameos. Like, why?
Fen Rao,
what would it serve? Like, no, they've assembled everyone that needs to be there. They're there. We don't always need someone to bail you out like they did in season 2. I mean, don't get me wrong. It was awesome to see Luke Skywalker, but like, Christ, part of the whole journey was Mandalorians themselves, without external help, retaking their world.
Working together.
Exactly. So that was the whole point, was to show like they were fractured because of themselves. Look, we need a leader in the form of Bo Katan who did it, led them, assembled everyone, showed up, and then just took out Gideon and the whole base. Why?
Yeah.
Because they finally worked together. There was no strife. They didn't, I was kind of expecting them to have like a little bit of a moment where they were kind of unsure about things. But, once Paz Vizsla did that big speech, I knew right then they're good. They're on the same page and we're going to move forward.
I think that it would be, I'm really glad that they didn't have cameos in this finale, because I think you can't beat season 2's finale. Like, it was so unexpected. And I know I did a double take and was like, wait, is that really him? And then R2-D2 was there, and I was just like, holy crap, this is amazing. And I don't think that would have worked a second time, because everyone, like you said, was like expecting something.
To be honest, I really wasn't expecting any. I wasn't expecting any cameo. At the most, I was expecting like Fen Rao. Like, I know there was a lot of talk about Fen. I mean, I don't know. You have to watch Rebels to know who Fen Rao is. I apologize if you guys haven't seen.
No,
Rebels.
You're good.
Yeah, Fen Rao, I mean, was a big part of the original kind of retaking of Mandalore with Bo Katan and Sabine Wren. Meanwhile, Sabine Wren missing from this season, big issues with that. I mean, she was very, very crucial to the Mandalore plot. I think there was a lot of aspects of Clone Wars and Rebels that were missing from this season, and I kind of wonder if that's from the lack of Filoni, because he was busy with Ahsoka. Favreau probably. I'm just wondering. I'm wondering if Filoni was more involved, or if he wasn't as involved, because there certainly felt like a lack of Clone Wars Rebels kind of, because we know, Anthony, you just talked about how everybody kind of came together so easily, how the two clans came together, and that's such a big plot, because, and again, you're going to have to see Clone Wars to understand this, but you have the two factions of Death Watch. You have Bo-Katan's faction, and then you have the faction that kind of lived on Concordia, that were the descendants. They're the children of the Watch. They're the other faction of Death Watch that kind of stayed loyal to Darth Maul after he took over Mandalore. He killed Pre Vizsla and he claimed the dark saber. And then there was Death Watch Mandalorians who were loyal to him. The children of the Watch. These are their children. So they're kind of sworn enemies in a sense. Bo-Katan, betrayed Death Watch essentially and left and formed her own faction. And they both walk like completely different, ways of life. And they are just like sworn enemies. They mention that. I think Moff Gideon mentions that. Like he says, like Bo-Katan is with like the children of the Watch or something like that. And he's like, that's impossible. They're sworn enemies. And we kind of really never get we get like a little bit of it, but we don't really kind of get like a backstory into that. And I really thought we were kind of going to get like another kind of civil war between the two factions this season before they kind of come together to take Mandalore. And to be honest, like I was kind of expecting that. So I was really surprised when, the Armorer and Bo-Katan kind of joined forces so quickly. I wouldn't say I was frustrated. It just was like, you have such a rich history and a rich lore with Mandalore, and to kind of, I mean, I guess maybe it's just turning the page and starting anew, right? Writing, I think that was kind of like the sense that they wanted to, the Armorer was like, we all need to kind of come together.
It seemed like a little bit of a missed opportunity, and you touched on that, this Clash of Clans, for maybe even an overarching season arc, because that could have been really cool. And I think that could have, one of the criticisms of the season has been that Mando didn't really have a whole lot of development, and I think that could have really caused him to wrestle with these other ways of being a Mandalorian. And he did that a little bit, but it seemed like it was just kind of there wasn't that focus on it, and that could have been really interesting.
I kind of think of it in like a Game of Thrones sense. I think Mando could have been like a pseudo Jon Snow in a sense, where you kind of bring everybody together, right? Because I hate to relate it, but the Mandalore plot is so similar to like Game of Thrones stuff. You have Bo Katan, who's kind of like Daenerys. She's like the exiled like heir to the throne, essentially. And there's a lot of people who don't think that that don't think she doesn't think she deserves the throne. And I kind of felt like there was such an opportunity there for Din to be the middleman and bring together two completely different groups of people. And like there was such an opportunity there for development that it almost felt like they could have died, like they could have went deeper into that, and they never did. And it was more so like Din kind of joined the Children of the Watch, never removed his helmet.
Do you think that when Mando supported, her with the dark saber and basically said that, it's hers on this technicality, do you think that was like
they totally wrote themselves into a corner with that? I mean, I don't even know why. I hate to like harp on it so much. I think there's nothing wrong with making Mando and Bo-Katan enemies for a little while, and then kind of bringing them back together. The Bo-Katan from Clone Wars definitely would have like fought Din over the dark saber, and it just kind of feels like I don't know. You have such a change of heart in Bo-Katan without such an explanation of that. Even from the season 2 finale, she looks so angry that Din has the dark saber, and Moff Gideon kind of like taunts her about it, and you kind of get this sense that they're going to be like there's going to be like they're going to be enemies for a little while. And I just think that they kind of wrote themselves into a corner. If they didn't want to make Bo-Katan and Din enemies for a little while, then they kind of like gave it to her on a technicality, right? Like
like, do you think, and Red, I'm curious on your thoughts too, do you think that this is why, the darksaber met the end that it got? After, like, it was super important, right? You have to have the darksaber to rule Mandalore. Obviously we just talked about the, Bo-Katan getting it, but obviously it was a big plot with Moff Gideon and what was at the end of season 1, and just like throughout Star Wars properties. And then it's just busted.
Yeah, I mean, the darksaber is such a crucial kind of I don't know. That was my biggest problem with the finale. I really enjoyed the finale. I really did like it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I just thought I love big action sequences like that, and it was like on such a grand scale and the cinematography was great. It looked great, so I really enjoyed that. The one aspect I didn't like was just destroying the darksaber. I was not a fan of that. Mainly because I feel like they didn't know how to write the story of the darksaber. They didn't know what to do with it next. They've committed to Bo-Katan. She's the ruler of Mandalore, and that she does. It kind of seems like they're accepting that they're turning the page on everything that they've done Mandalore-wise, and they're completely starting anew, which maybe isn't a terrible thing when Mandalore has been completely destroyed and you want to start anew on Mandalore. But yeah, I mean, overall, I don't know. I feel like there's so much more left to do with certain Mandalorian aspects.
What do you think, Red?
So it's funny you mentioned the darksaber question to me, because maybe you missed it, but I wrote it in Discord, like a thought I had about it. I'm like, yes, I'm kind of sad that the darksaber were destroyed. I mean, it's quite a crucial and important weapon, as we mentioned, but the fact that they were stuck in this ancient way of that the only way for someone to rule was by possessing a weapon. Yeah. That's very Arthurian, the best way to put it.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of describing it.
But at this point, I think it was the trials that Bo went through this season alongside Mandalorian that shows that it doesn't matter if she had the darksaber or not. By the point that she actually had it literally handed to her, she had earned it through her leadership. And my comment ultimately was, even though the weapon signified the role, it's the fact that Bo this season showed that she had that role it was innate to her. It was just already there within. And adding the dark saber, you could almost, I wouldn't even call it an asterisk or anything, just like it was there to signify the moment when it was apparent, so that the other Mandalorians could see it. At that point, it didn't matter if she had it. That thing could have been thrown in the trash as soon as it happened, but it was when the other Mandalorians realized it. And that's what set the course for her. And yet, again, it really sucks that it got destroyed in that manner, but it doesn't matter. We got to see her do a very important ritual. She relit the forge there underneath Mandalore. Like that's like going to Mecca. That's going to Jerusalem. That's your big holy moment. She did it. It was her.
I think that, if you look at, and I'm glad you mentioned like that she didn't really need it at the end too, because, in that, and I keep calling it the pilot, but it's not, it's the first episode of season 3. Like we meet her and she's like sprawled on her throne, right? She's depressed. She's like scoffing at Mando, just saying like, she doesn't have the dark saber. What could she do essentially? And now by the end, it's totally different. And I think like her character had a lot of growth over the season, and I think that that's a really interesting arc for her, and she's in a different place and more worthy of being the ruler of the Mandalorian. So I think that was really fun and just really great storytelling.
Something I almost expected to happen. It's a little cheesy, forgive me, listeners, but it would have been neat that at the very end they showed the Mandalorian and then an S kind of slowly faded in, the MandalorianS.
Ooh.
Just because the way that they handle it, we're not just focusing on one singular storyline, because we spent a good amount of time with her as well. And if you think about it, by the end of this finale, what is Grogu? He is a Mandalorian now. His dad put him forth. So you could almost say this is the MandalorianS, and you're telling multiple stories. You're telling that of Din Djarin, that of Din Grogu, that of Bo Katan. It was just like a thing. I was like, I got to mention this to somebody because I had the thought.
I think they're going for another TV show, honestly, with Bo Katan and Mandalore.
A separate one?
That's like the kind of feeling that I got from that. Like you kind of split everybody up in a sense. You send Din off with Grogu, you send them back to kind of season 1 kind of aspect, I mean, they kind of like said it, we're on a case by case basis. It's like we're doing episode of the week, like they kind of said it, like, so that's where we're headed with season 4. And you can't really just leave all these characters just there doing nothing. So I think I could see them kind of doing a season of maybe Bo Katan armor, axe woves and Oscar Reeves, just rebuilding Mandalore. I would love to see that. There's more to do with the Mythosaur.
Yeah.
There's more to do with Mandalore itself, rebuilding the capital city. So yeah, I mean, I would love to see another like a Mandalore show. I think that there's kind of a lot of room for it.
Not everyone is going to be happy that Mandalore is back, right? Essentially, and not everyone is going to be happy with how Mandalore is going to be governed. The 3 factions essentially have peace right now. Is it 3 right now? Yeah, but maybe we'll get, or is it 4? I've lost track. Maybe maybe that Civil War storyline you mentioned before, could come into play in a season 4.
It would be kind of redundant if they did this. So to kind of reference Clone Wars and Rebels again, we didn't see anybody from Clan Saxon, and they were the enemies in Clone Wars and Rebels. They were the faction of Mandalorians, the clan of Mandalorians that basically took Imperial, like they were under Imperial order, and basically they ruled Mandalore because the Empire allowed them to, essentially. So I think that there's still room for like a storyline there of, I mean, would it be redundant to do Saxon Empire story again? Maybe a little bit, but I think that they could get creative if they had good writing.
Now I want to get into a little bit more specifics and, besides just what we were talking about, and kind of get your general opinions on a few things, and then we're going to talk about questions. So, favorite moments from this finale and least favorite moments. And Red, I'm gonna go ahead and, put you on the spot for this.
Oh, I definitely know my favorite moment. It was there where Grogu was fighting alongside Din when they were going up against the Praetorian guards. I almost really liked the moment before while he still had the IG unit and everything, but it was just really cool just seeing him using the force in little bits. He wasn't even going so hard with it. He just did enough to push their weapons away or to get them in a spot. And I never really thought I'd see Grogu and the Mando teaming up. So thinking that like, hey, we're only far along. Imagine how future action sequences could be when Grogu himself can start shooting and meleeing and stuff. And whenever I'm sure his powers in the Force are going to grow. There's no way he's going to give that up. So it's neat to see what they could possibly do. And it was just cool seeing how little he was and how capable he was. And you got to admit, Praetorian guards are like the toughest SOBs in the galaxy, and they took out 3 of them, and he didn't even have weaponry except for like one gun. Like imagine a fully armed, like set up Mando. He probably could have taken at least one by himself. But seeing them 3 team up was awesome.
Do you think the Praetorian guards in, this episode were basically equivalent to those in The Last Jedi? Were they as badass, for lack of a better word?
No, I think they were a little SOP, but that happens. I understand for the sake of it. Mando had to come out of that one. So, um,
Yeah, I mean,
but then as
they're
far as my
definitely.
least favorite moment, just before I forget it, um, I wasn't that crazy about the whole clone thing because now it opened up the discourse for people
Mhm.
to say, is it possible that Gideon himself was a clone? That's like the only thing I didn't care for, just because I know that's going to be the thing talked about until we get an official answer one day.
And I think we're going to talk about that again too in a little bit because that was one of our questions. But Drew, how about you? What was your favorite moment and your least favorite moment?
Favorite moments. I mean, I think the whole kind of last 20 minutes of the episode was kind of my favorite when you get that huge kind of action sequence. It like felt like a Clone Wars almost kind of scene. You have all the Mandalorians flying in with the jetpacks against like the Imperial, um, is, is it Imperial Super Commandos? I don't remember the specific name of the troopers, but yeah, I just love that whole kind of action sequence. I love the Moff Gideon Mandalorian helmet, and he looked super cool with that, man. I really love that. It's gonna make for like some cool like merchandise. People are gonna go crazy for that. But I thought there was some good action. I liked the Mando and Bo Katan and Grogu versus Moff Gideon, and I I like the part when Grogu does like a little knee slide that kind of mirrors Bo Katan and Mando. So yeah, I like the last like the final battle was definitely one of my favorite aspects. My least favorite, I already mentioned I didn't like the dark saber being destroyed. I think because a lot of Star Wars fans have a personal attachment to that kind of storyline. I did not like in the very beginning how quickly Grogu saves Din. I thought that was a little bit cheap. Um, I don't think we ever really saw him going back and how he got back into the base. I don't think there was ever really kind of a explanation unless I missed something. I mean, did you guys see anything? I've seen some comments like we don't really know how he got back in there.
From what I remember, Grogu took off while Paz Vizsla was holding off everybody. Like he had taken off before even the Mandalorians
Mhm.
had. So,
Yeah, I don't
yep.
know. Like, regardless, it was kind of unexplained. It was maybe
Hmm.
something you have to like look in the background for, but
Mhm.
um, I forgot to mention I really liked the hallway fight scene. That was like very Daredevil. Like
Yep.
I really liked that. It felt very like Daredevil kind of choreography. I really dug that. That was cool. I almost kind of forgot about that because it was in the beginning of the episode, but that was a highlight for me too. So yeah, I really, um, there's some story bits that, maybe I don't love, but I really liked this finale. I thought it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and thinking about the things that I like, I and didn't like, there was I think so much more that I liked than I didn't like. And, I guess I'll mention a couple specific moments. That final scene I thought was just lovely, where they're on the cabin in Navarro and Grogu has the little frog, and we fade down to that circle. That was just
Mm-hmm.
super cute. I loved the scene with R5, and
Yes.
yeah, you mentioned that, and like the little mouse droids, and he just jetpacks away. I thought that was so cute, and it reminded me of that famous R2D2 scene where he's saving everyone else's butt. So I thought that was kind of a nice callback to the older movies. And I liked everything with Carson Teva because I really
Mm-hmm.
like the actor. And it's somewhat jarring for me too because I'm so used to seeing him from Kim's Convenience.
Appa.
So, yep, Appa, exactly. And like I hear the Appa voice, and I just like, and now he's in the Star Wars clothes, so it's like it's there's a disconnect there, but I'm enjoying all of it. As far as stuff I didn't like this was a very action-packed episode in a very short period of time, right? And I think that I wanted a little bit more time to breathe between the action sequences. And I think there was a moment where they're in the garden, right, in the underground caves. They're having their Jurassic Park moment. It's like life persists, but
Mm-hmm.
really, if you watch Jurassic Park, it's like life finds a way. I would have liked to spend just maybe another minute there because there's a whole lot of stuff going on. And that was just very pretty and is just a moment to breathe. So I wish we had spent more time there.
I have
Yeah.
one honorable mention.
Okay.
I'd say the coolest shot in the episode though was when Bo Katan was leading the charge and unsheathed the dark
Yep.
saber. You gotta admit it looked so cool, man. Like that's a moment you're gonna remember. Like similar to the way you think back in certain
Mm-hmm.
moments with the original trilogy. I'm like, I'm never gonna forget that shot of Bo Katan flying, dark saber in hand,
Yeah.
leading
Very
a
cool.
crap ton of Mandalorians, man.
Now, I want to, it kind of reminding me of that a little bit is, some of our questions because, you know, so I guess my main question, and this is a question that Blacklight also asked us in our Discord, is Gideon really dead? What are your thoughts?
I made a tweet the other day. I was like, season 4, episode 7, somehow Gideon returned. Like, I feel like we're heading towards that. And at this point, it wouldn't shock me. I mean, kind of like they like to put Gideon in the last 2 episodes to give them a villain of the season. I mean, is he dead? Could it have been one of his clones? I mean, that's a great. Somebody should tell Jon Favreau that. He could write that in and bring Giancarlo Esposito back. I think there's definitely a possibility. Is he dead? A lot of people mentioned that he had no mustache and his hair was gray, and that's not how he looked last season. And I think that was because if you ever noticed, or if you noticed, there was a very little amount of Giancarlo Esposito, and I think that he was probably filming something else that required him not to have a mustache,
Mm-hmm.
not to dye his hair. So I would assume that's probably why that's why they probably put him in the helmet, because there was really no kind of backstory to, like, besides the fact that he was on Mandalore, as to why he had the Mandalorian helmet on. I would assume probably because he wasn't really available for filming for a good portion of the Moff Gideon stuff. Could they kind of retcon that into it was one of his clones and he was somewhere else? Absolutely. I don't see any reason why not. Would people hate that? Probably. Would some people like that?
Probably.
Probably.
No.
Yeah.
And I want to ask real quick too, and this is also to Anthony when he talks about if he thinks Gideon is dead. Do you think that his Gideon's death was like, should he have died in battle, or is like this fiery spaceship crashing down on him a good end for him?
I think it's a good end because at the same time, it signifies how everything just went wrong and blew up in his face, literally.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about it. A couple days before, everything was peachy keen, and then Mandalorian shows up again for the second time and ruins his life. Like season
Third
1,
time.
you're right. Jeez, man.
He's the big bad of all 3 seasons, essentially, right?
No, I
Two
was thinking
episodes as
back.
well.
Yeah, but it was like season 1, he knocked him out of that TIE fighter, thought he was dead, left him there. Season 2 helps him get captured and taken away, thinks he's dead, and then boom, surprise, I'm still here. Like Christ, I do feel bad for Mando. You really think you've gotten rid of this guy and he keeps popping back up? Mando even says to Grogu, we're never going to be safe until this guy is gone. So I need you to be brave and let's go take him on. And then they did.
That moment was just so like heartwarming. You know, that should have been in the top moments too, I think, because that is that was just phenomenal.
Yeah. When he's
Yeah.
like, Grogu, I need you to be brave. That was
Yep,
just like,
Yeah, I know.
he is no longer just a Mandalorian. He is a dad. He's been,
exactly.
but like that was the moment where it's like, you
The
know,
Dadalorian.
the
Yeah.
Dadalorian. And that's what I
Yeah.
like there about the very ending when he spoke up for Grogu and said, you know, like I speak on his behalf. I want him to become my apprentice and everything. The way they tied it from the beginning of the episode there to the end, it was just beautiful.
Yeah, so I'm gonna mention something real quick. I had a so early in the season I kind of had a theory. Once there was some rumors that he had a Mandalorian helmet. So I had some ideas about that. Earlier in the season, I was going to write an article about how he wasn't really Moff Gideon. Obviously this didn't transpire, and I kind of wish it would have because it felt like it would be cool. But where he kind of wasn't Moff Gideon anymore, he was just Gideon. And one of the kind of evil exiled factions of Mandalorians break him out of prison, and he becomes a Mandalorian, a part of their Mandalorian tribe,
No.
and then you have those two Mandalorian factions fighting for who retakes Mandalore, and essentially Gideon becomes a Mandalorian because he's kind of like he was captured, he's kind of become invalidated by the Empire, so he has nowhere left to go, and I felt like that would have been like a really like a great story to see both Din and the Children of the Watch, and then getting the flip side of that and seeing Gideon with another Mandalorian faction, and just seeing kind of like, kind of getting like a mirror of the two, like a yin and the yang, almost in a sense. That was just like an idea I had, and I kind of wish they pursued that, or I wish we could have got something close to that, but obviously we didn't.
All right. So, obviously, there's some maybe a little bit of interesting thoughts on whether or not Gideon's a clone or whether or not he's actually dead. Blacklight from our Discord had a question sort of related to that. And he wanted to know, do we think the Gideon cloning storyline set up, all the way back when we first saw Gideon, is it connected to Palpatine's cloning programs? Or is it just, one of Gideon's side projects because he kept it secret from Hux and, the other folks at the Shadow Council?
My initial
Yeah.
thought is that it could be a little bit of both. So it had something to do with Palpatine's cloning and the fact that he was able to find the engineer in Dr. Pershing and then the resources to start getting the cloning process started, right? But at the same time, he was keeping it like, hey, not to the forefront, as Blacklight even mentions that he kept it a secret from Hux and the other warlords. So I'd call it a little bit of both.
I would agree. Yeah, I think they are definitely heading towards, they're building up to, I think they're trying to do it justice, which is so funny because the Palpatine storyline, I mean, there's kind of rumors that Ian McDiarmid kind of came in at the last second for Palpatine. So it kind of feels like it was an idea that they threw together at the last second. And now they kind of have a whole faction of Star Wars that's kind of dedicated to validating this story that a lot of people thought was just totally bogus. But yeah, to answer the question, I do. You have a connection between the Bad Batch. I don't know if anybody's seen, I don't know if you guys have seen the Bad Batch, but there is a pretty big cloning storyline with Camino in the first season of Bad Batch, where basically the cloning, I forgot, but the Kaminoans basically are taken by the Empire for their cloning research. That probably leads to this, where you have Gideon now cloning, trying to imbue himself with, or infuse the Force into his clones, and obviously we see that that's successful because Snoke eventually does have he wields the Force, and we know he's a clone. So eventually that we know that kind of whatever they're doing there is successful. I think I don't remember, somebody mentioned Project Necromancer
With Pershing, right?
No, it was in the Shadow Council. They mentioned like a very quickly they said something about Project Necromancer, and I mean I would assume that that's probably Palpatine stuff, you know.
So do you
Make
think that
it.
do
Go
you
ahead.
think that'll come, back, Project Necromancer? Will we see that expanded upon,
Yeah,
or will it be just something in the galaxy that we're not?
yeah. I do. Probably in the culmination movie, I think we'll probably like get some. We'll probably see the Shadow Council again. We'll probably see Hux's dad, um, Pelion, Thrawn. I would almost like. I would love to see Moff Gideon and Thrawn interact because it's very clear that they don't really like each other. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought it'd been really great for Thrawn to be the one to kill Moff Gideon. But yeah, I think that'll come back, and because there is going to become like this story is going to come to an end. Thrawn is going to lose eventually. Um, there's going to be an end to the story, and there's going to be the sequel trilogy. And how do you tie those together? More than likely, it's going to be the cloning stuff with Palpatine. You know, you're going to have Thrawn lose. You're going to have Gideon's going to lose. I mean, we don't know actually because the First Order. I mean, they're successful, so I would assume that if Thrawn and Gideon lose, it keeps the Empire alive somehow, and that's probably through cloning. With
I'm
they're able to make Snoke. You know,
I'm so glad you mentioned Thrawn, because I know one of there was a lot of speculation about this episode, and people thought, well, maybe we'll see Thrawn. Did you guys ever think that was a possibility? When, obviously we're gonna see him in Ahsoka. Um,
yeah,
what
Thrawn is very far away.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree with that.
he's somewhere. Him and Ezra are somewhere unreachable, obviously. And Pelion kind of hints towards that. He's like, they're working on they're working on a grand plan to bring him back. And I mean, obviously that's what's gonna come to fruition in Ahsoka. You're gonna see that plan. You're gonna see them. I would assume most of Ahsoka, Ahsoka is gonna further a lot of the plot that you see from Mandalorian this season with the New Republic and the Empire. You're gonna see, Ahsoka and Sabine looking for Ezra, and then you're going to have on the flip side, you're going to have other people looking for Thrawn, and I would assume probably it ends with both of them coming back, and then we continue on from there.
Your comments just made me realize that the episode The Jedi of season 2 of The Mandalorian was a backdoor pilot for Ahsoka.
It
I
was
think
indeed
that's true,
because
yeah.
It's been a long
it
time
was
since I've seen a show actually become a backdoor pilot out of something else, especially this big. Like,
yeah, no, it
that's,
definitely is, because
you know,
you have Morgan Elsbeth in the trailer. She's the Night Sister. With the Beskar staff.
mhm.
She's back and we see her in the trailer. She's in actually. If you notice, if you look at the trailer, she's in the same ship that you see Thrawn walking in. You see the shot of behind Thrawn. You see them in the same ship together. The difference between the shot is one is at night and one is during the day, and I think that was kind of to try and throw the audience off. But you can
Mhm.
see they're in the same ship, so whatever is going on with Thrawn, she's obviously involved, and clearly, Ahsoka knows that she knows. Ahsoka knows that Morgan Elsbeth knows where Thrawn is essentially. So, I mean,
Right.
I think we're heading towards that.
So I have a couple of things that I'm gonna ask you guys about, and not quite rapid fire, but I just want, your opinion. So nobody rode the Mythosaur at the end of the episode. Are you sad about that? Did you
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, for
First
sure.
episode of the show, we literally had Quill, telling him, "Hey, your people once rode the great Mythosaur, and nobody rode the damn Mythosaur." And I'm just curious why they showed the shot of his eye. Like, it looked like Grogu talked to it through the Force. Did it not? Was that okay? So it wasn't just me. Because
I
it
don't
was
know.
like he had the moment where like he's focusing, and then all of a sudden, like the camera switches over to the Mythosaur, and he opens up his eye, and I'm like, did he tell him something? Like, is there some quiet communication that just happened?
Theories, yeah, I've
Right?
seen some theories that people are like, Grogu's is Mandalore because he was, he awakened the Mythosaur. I don't know. Maybe they'll touch on that eventually. But yeah, I think the Mythosaur stuff was a missed opportunity, especially because you hint at it in episode 2. That kind of gave me the sense that it's like, we're gonna get the Mythosaur at the end of the season. That like a very cliche plot is you hinted something toward it at the beginning of the season, and then it comes to fruition at the end of the season. And then you even have Bo Katan spending like 2 episodes trying to convince the armorer that the Mythosaur is real.
Yep.
And you get to the point where she believes her, and then it just feels like kind of none of that really
Matters.
And
Yeah.
you're even at the end, you're even in the same, like, water. I don't know, is it a lake? I don't even know what it is under that underground, like,
It's the waters that he was, the living waters or something
The living
like
waters of
that.
Mandalore.
Yeah.
It
It's
is the living
essentially an
water.
underwater lake. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like you're there. It's like that was the perfect opportunity for the Mythosaur to show up. But yeah,
I
maybe
think
we'll
that
get that in the future.
it fits, in the lines with a lot of the criticism of season 3 is that they set up something. They set up this Mythosaur and they didn't pay it off in the finale. And like that leaves your audience disappointed. And, so I can understand why people would be frustrated with that if they had this expectation, if they just like, it was lined up for them and it didn't happen. Somebody mentioned Grogu. Somebody mentioned, maybe Grogu using the Force to talk to the Mythosaur. So I want to circle back to him because I think there's a lot in this finale that like happened with him, and it also goes to Alex's question, which we'll talk about later. So were you guys disappointed he didn't say a word? Were you expecting that?
He did say a word. I'm convinced that he said this is the way in that one scene.
Oh yeah, you told me this
season,
before. Yeah, I remember.
I'm totally convinced that he if you go back and listen to it, I can literally, like, you can hear exactly what he's saying. I don't almost honestly feel like they intended that to be his first words, and the audience, nobody just picked up on it, and they just never acknowledged it. Like I almost feel like, because there was a pause when he said it, there was a pause. Bo Katan and Din both back at him, like, did you just say something? And then none of the audience ever really picked up on that. Nobody said anything like after the episode. So I almost feel like that was like they intended that to be his first words, and just nobody picked up on it. But I think it undoes a little bit of Grogu if he starts talking. This is Disney after all, and you have to keep some cute factor in there. I think the noises, the little like patu and the noises, I can't see them. Maybe he'll say like words, like just one word, but I can't see him talking like Yoda.
Well, Alex asked us a question, and he wanted to know if we thought, we'd have an older Din Grogu when we get to Star Wars: Heir to the Empire, and maybe that Grogu could talk. What do you? What are your thoughts on Star Wars: Heir to the Empire, an older Din Grogu, like all of that?
I don't really think so. Grogu is 50, around something like that, 50. Yoda lived to 900. I think it was something like that, 900. So, I mean, it's like almost like you're doing it in dog years, but like the opposite, right? Like, I'm trying to think. I'm trying to play out the timeline in my head, because they're in like 9. Yeah. Anyways, I don't think there's enough time for him to really like age a dramatic amount. I mean, I think there's maybe 15, 20 years in between Mando and the sequel trilogy, maybe less. So it's a matter of like, would Grogu dramatically age like that? I don't think so. I think he's gonna probably be a child for a while. I mean, maybe in the Rey movie we'll get like a little bit of an older Grogu, but I just can't see them. I mean, maybe they'll do another trilogy someday about Grogu where he's older and he's an adult. But yeah, at the moment right now, I don't see him getting much older.
So we're not going to see a teenage Grogu, like teenage Groot in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Maybe someday. That would be cool. I just think that everybody loves Baby Yoda. Like, that's just, that's really what, at the end of the day, that's what drew people to the show in the beginning. I love Mandalorians. I love the Mandalorian plot in Clone Wars. I was like, bring on more Mandalorians. But without Baby Yoda, this show does not become what it is.
What do you think? Sorry, go ahead.
I'm like Werner Herzog in one of the first episodes. I would like to see the baby.
Yeah, literally.
I want to see the baby. I'm here for the baby. So, am I hoping for him to be older? No, I like him the way he is.
Yep.
Forever
There's your
young.
answer, Alex. Sorry, buddy, but no.
So, Grogu, he's not just Grogu, he's Din Grogu. He's adopted by Mando. You know, we get all that name stuff, which I know has been controversial on the internet. You know, is he Din
I have
Grogu?
thoughts.
Is he Jin Grogu? Like what's the deal?
I have thoughts.
All right,
I
share
don't.
them.
Well, like you have to explain it because it's like, why is he Din Grogu? You know, you have all these other Mandalorians who take on their family name. It's like, what was Din his family name? Like, is it Jaren Din? Like, is it like, you know, like, is his first name his last name? It just was a little confusing. You know, like when I heard that, I was like, you know, maybe they just thought Din Grogu rolls off the tongue better, you know, than Grogu Jaren. You know, I don't know. I hope it gets. I hope they elaborate on it. I hope somebody explains why. I mean, you know, I'm all into Mandalorian culture, and I really was not expecting that. But yeah,
I'll say this, as a Latino, naming conventions just don't matter anymore. You get what you get, you roll with it. That's your name. That's it.
All right, so do you guys, there's a line I think where they talk about that he's gonna have to go on quests, right? Like because he's an apprentice. Like, do you have any thoughts on who Mando was apprenticed to, or is this like settled in your mind?
I don't really think it's anybody important, honestly. I mean, it would be cool to get like a prequel, like, you know, like the first episode of Bad Batch. You see Kanan Jarrus with his like master, and unfortunately, you see her die in Order 66, and you that kind of helps to flesh out the understanding of Kanan and the trauma and stuff like that, and why he doesn't trust clones and rebels, and you know, you see a little bit about why Din hates droids because of, you know, his family dying from droids. I think there's always an opportunity to do flashbacks in season 4 to, you know, Mando with his master, I guess if you want to call him that, and kind of mirror what's going on. It helps to provide context into the way that Din acts. I think it would be cool, but is it somebody important? I don't know. I don't think so, because he grew up with the Children of the Watch. I mean, is there a member of House Vizsla that was one of his? It could just be somebody random. I mean, they're kind of starting to introduce random Mandalorians with names that we're not really familiar with. So, is it going to be somebody that we know? Probably not.
So you don't think it's the armor then?
No.
No, I think they're probably around the same age. Um, yeah, it's got to be an elder. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's definitely a lot to do there. You know, Death Watch is not just Pre Vizsla and it's not just one person. There's a lot of members of Death Watch to flesh out some of that story would be pretty cool. I make a lot of Clone Wars references, so I do apologize about that. But there's just a lot of story there that a lot of opportunity to build on.
Do you guys have any final thoughts and you know about season 3 of The Mandalorian? Is there anything that you wish that you know that you want people to know, or that you wish kind of wish for the future of the series that you want to share, or the
So
characters?
one thing I did not expect, and it's still a little bit of a shock as a Houstonian, that one of our owns would show up in freaking Star Wars, man. Lizzo is in Star Wars. And then not just that, but she was in a relationship with Jack Black.
Yeah.
Like,
and then they
this is a
defeated
full
Christopher
sentence
Lloyd.
I'm saying that's real. Like,
and they
hold the
babysat
phone.
Grogu.
And they babysat Grogu. And not just that, but baby Grogu got knighted because he helped Lizzo cheat to win her little ball game.
Like a fever dream, you know, like
It was a fever dream. And oh, by the way, Doc Brown is here and he's the bad guy. I remember people were theorizing that he was going to be this elder Mandalorian
that was me.
I know, but you weren't the only one thinking like stuff like that. And it's like, no, he's just this dude who's still loyal to the Empire. Like, what?
Yeah.
There
He was
was
loyal to the Separatists. He was loyal to Count Dooku.
Oh yeah,
So he was loyal to the droids. That's why they had all those droids on that dome planet, which looks strikingly like Mandalore. And I was like, because I remember people were like, not to get off topic for a second, but that shot was in the trailer when they first arrived to that like city, and they see a domed city, and everybody was like, "Oh my god, it's a Mandalore flashback. We're gonna see Mandalore." and it was like, that wasn't, it's like such a tease, like, but yeah, like that was just such a fun episode. Like, was I irked that it was like at the end of the season a little bit, but it just is crazy. Yeah, I mean that was just a nuts episode.
There was a meme, and I think Christopher Lloyd even like retweeted it, that basically had like a shot of the Mandalorian like press image or something like that, and then a picture of him in front of the DeLorean from Back to the Future, and it was like the Mandalorian and then the man in the DeLorean, and I love that.
I love that meme.
When his episode was coming up, I was like, you know what they should call him? They should call him Oriendell. It sounds like a Star Wars name, and it's DeLorean flipped.
Oh,
It's just a silly thought I had when I was like up and like having my coffee, and I'm like,
that would have been
Del Orient,
good.
right? I know, just crazy things I come up with in the morning. But
You asked
another
about
thing I really, really liked about this season, and it's left field, is how Mando warmed up to droids. He was like very like,
He needs his
if I
friends,
have
right?
to, I'll work with this R5 because that's the only way I can go back to Mandalore. Like he was willing to compromise one thing he was really strongly against because knowing the mission that he wanted to accomplish was way more prioritized. And then guess what it did? It opened up his relationship with R5, and then he started doing the whole thing for IG-11, getting him all the parts rolling so that he could fix them up. And then at the very end, he, instead of asking for like an advance payment in a form of a new ship or something, he asked for a new IG-11, fixes it, and then makes it the Marshal. So he takes care of two problems right there.
Can we go back real quick to the IG-11? And this was not in the end of the season, but this was towards the beginning. But those little guys, and I'm forgetting their names. And Zellans, yeah. That was so freaking cool. And I just the shot, yeah, like the Gulliver's Travel shot, right, where Mando is in the workshop was just like, I loved that.
That was awesome. I love the way they talk too. It's just, it's like Fraggle Rock, like you guys ever seen
It reminded me of the dudes from Men in Black. I guess Men in Black. Yep. Where they're in the coffee room. Like it just gave me those vibes.
There's something so Star Wars about them, right? Like it's just perfect.
And I think we're just about at time. So, thank you everyone for listening. It's been a great episode. You can find all of our writing, all of our content at thecosmiccircus.com. Including our continuing coverage of Mando and any other Star Wars stuff. So where can folks find you guys, Anthony and Drew?
You can find me on Twitter. My handle is DrewReed1099. I'm constantly tweeting my thoughts on everything, so always feel free to chime in if you want.
This is Anthony, and I had a great little chat with my friends here. You can find me on Twitter at Redovah, REDOVAH_.
And I'm Isla Ruby, and you can find me on Twitter at TULINWrites. It's been wonderful, guys. I will see you and talk with you next time. Bye.